Things are about to get exciting at Ducati, because listen up. 2026 will mark Ducati's 100th anniversary. Hi, this is Andre, and this is Ducati. I'll be using a lot of cutaway shots because there are so many people here that it's impossible to properly film these motorcycles. Let's start with the sexiest one, the most unreasonable V4R. Of course, the motorcycle is actually very reasonable because it has to exist so that Nicola Bulega can win the World Championship. The refreshed latest Panigale V4R, based on the V4S. More power, meaning they claim 218 horsepower, but they declare that with Ducati's special oil, it can even reach 230 horsepower with the exhaust and so on. 186 kilograms as it stands without fuel, meaning with oil and coolant, but without fuel. More aerodynamics, these side wings, like in MotoGP, appeared for the first time on a street motorcycle. Besides that, a dry clutch, a 1000cc displacement to meet the regulations, and above all, the suspension is not semi-active because this is a motorcycle strictly for the track. For amateurs, I still think that semi-active suspension will be better, but if someone wants the top Ducati race bike, then they'll go for this. The question is there a TTX in the back? Yes. And you know, this is a real Erlins because, let's be honest, all the stock Erlins, yes, they work nicely, but this is a racing component that can handle the temperature, the load, and so on. Its performance doesn't drop during the ride. As you can see, there are already 1 million gadgets, sets, permanently, or are these already sets? Yes, I've picked up racing carbon wheels, which for racing, well, they won't pass anyway. Let's come back down to earth. I'll show you a motorcycle that, in my opinion, will be Ducati's biggest hit in the coming years. Probably not this year yet, because now we're looking at its prototype, but it's already quite advanced, namely the DesertX. The motorcycle is based on the engine and frame that I've already talked about in the case of the Panigale V2 and the Street Fighter V2. And this is the motorcycle that really needed this. It needed it. Light frame, light engine. Here's the information. 110 horsepower, 206 kilograms without fuel. Ducati always gives the weight without fuel because, after all, it depends on how much fuel you pour in, so it's easier to estimate that way. For a mid-class adventure bike, this could be a hit. It's really funny and interesting that no matter how you look at it, even the current DesertX, which is much heavier, gets really great reviews among ADV users. Well, up until now, it has mainly performed on the street, on the road, and it handled itself well off-road, but here its off-road performance could be even better, and you can see it's already prepared to really fly through the terrain. So we have a tank with these kinds of guards, which means if you tip over or hit something, this motorcycle is protected straight from the factory. There's no longer a steel frame, only the engine serves as a load-bearing element, and the frame here is just this small, delicate piece, just like it was in the Panigale V2. But the suspension, at least by the looks of it, has at least 200 millimeters of travel, which is interesting. There's some kind of update to the calipers because they look a bit different than the ones we know. But yes, a steering damper will probably be included as standard, or at least I think so, because it's necessary for fast riding. You can see how it's been designed. There's some kind of tower for additional navigation and so on. At the back, there's preload adjustment for the spring and probably some advanced electronics. When the DesertX comes out, I suspect it's going to cause quite a stir in the mid-range ADV segment. In my opinion, this engine makes the most sense in this type of machine because in the Panigale V2, everyone says, oh, it has less power than before, but here we don't need that much power. What we need is 110 horsepower, throttle response, and torque, which will also be somewhere above 90, maybe even 100 Newton meters. Well, look, what a curiosity. They are going fast with off-road. 450 Desmo Enduro. This engine is a powerhouse. Through the Desmodromic system, Elijah was already delighted with it. Is this kind of power needed in Enduro? Well, probably not. But this is where the electronics come in handy, which surprised Elijah, which helps maintain traction and stay on the motorcycle, which in Enduro, for example, in my case, would be crucial to help me with traction so the bike doesn't jerk in tricky situations. So we'll see. Here's also a prototype of the 250 Cross, but let's go check out the Hypermotard because maybe the Hypermotard will finally be the one that I actually like. And here it is, the Hypermotard V2. So conceptually, the Hypermotard should have always been a perfect fit for my personality. But for me, the Hypermotard, it was always just a little bit too heavy, simply put. This one is 180 kilograms without fuel. The SP version, I'll show you in a moment, is 177 kilograms. It's still not, something like 150 kilograms, but let's remember this is a V2 engine. 120 horsepower, so it's not a slow motorcycle. It's not a supermoto like the KTM 690. This is a supermoto. You can actually ride a bit farther in some civilized conditions. And then you look at the SP version and your jaw drops because it has white wheels. White rims are the most important thing on a motorcycle, especially if you want to imagine you're still a teenager. Looks awesome. Super cool. Stylistically, it kind of resembles the old Duke 690, that old rascal, but with super sharp lines, some spoilers or whatever, hydraulic clutch, and definitely an anti-hopping clutch. And if we put on a Terminioni, it'll probably have 127 horsepower or something close to 130, and the weight will go down. Well, this could already be considered a very serious and impressive toy, especially for use on small tracks or circuits. I sincerely hope that it will turn out to be much better and more enjoyable to ride than the previous generation of the Hypermotard, which, to be fair, was a decent and capable bike in its own right, but it was not quite the super machine or high-performance marvel that you might imagine or expect from such a model. A super fun toy for... Of course, it costs a lot of money, but if we want to see what costs even more, let's go. All right, but maybe before we spend even more money, here's the Monster Plus, the refreshed Monster, also with that familiar V-twin. And again, let me say this. This engine in this body could actually be really good. Let's consider how much sense it makes to have both the Monster V2 and the Street Fighter V2, but really, it's just about which style you prefer. This one will definitely be calmer, maybe a bit cheaper, while the other is more of a troublemaker. Now we're moving on to the wallet draining section, which is the Diavel V4. The RS Diavel, which has 180 horsepower. Ducati claims that this is the fastest, and that's probably true, because thanks to the tire, the power, and the torque, it's the fastest accelerating motorcycle in their history in a straight line. Great news for everyone who loves riding in the city and doesn't want to be beaten at the lights by any electric Chinese SUV. Seriously, a dry clutch, desmodromic valve timing, 180 horsepower, 120 Newton meters, and a style so cool that when you pull up to a restaurant, people say, wow, hop on, Bariwa.
The new Ducati Diavel V4 RS, which means a lot of money, a lot of horsepower. You're probably scratching the carbon cover on this motorcycle right now. And a scratched carbon cover on the 4
RS. But that's the seat.
Yeah, I didn't scratch the cover, but here's the carbon.
And this is the seat, so this is, when you're on a sports bike, you feel like you're getting a kick out of it as a passenger.
But
this is the discharge of fear. No, this is, yes it is, but a leg entered here. Check. It's a disaster, people. It's impossible to work here. And tick. Multistrada RS. It cannot be denied that it is an incredibly addictive device. The year 2026 will be Ducati's centenary. So World Ducati Week in 2026 will be pure, exhilarating madness. And we will definitely see many more special, unique versions. Oh yes, speaking about special versions, I'm going to show you something else. How do you draw attention to the Panigale V4R RS? If you want to make a motorcycle stand out, you just paint it in the Pecco Bagnaia livery. I'm curious if the guys had any influence on how these motorcycles would look. Because Bagnaia's bike looks completely different from Marquez's bike. And Marquez is featured in this graphic. If you remember when Marquez switched to Ducati, he had a suit and helmet in that Panigale V2 Marc Marquez 93 style. I think selling this particular motorcycle won't be a problem. They'll sell out quickly. Ducati is just being Ducati. As usual, there's a wild crowd and you can't get through. It shows that Italian passion, that Italian brand can still steal the show at these kinds of fairs. Take care.